My name is Jim Carreri. I'm a deaf senior citizen living in Tacoma, Washington. And I'm from Pittsburgh originally. I don't know how to take the orange out of the image. So this isn't going to be as tonal of a painting as I would like it to be. But if you've heard that I am someone who carries a grudge or grinding an axe, you heard wrong. I just do not agree with the general views of the American establishment since LBJ took power. Now, it shouldn't be so controversial because I'm right about a lot of these issues. And I am deaf, which means I'm not legally eligible for Clint Eastwood's secret draft or anything like that. They do it anyway, which I want to discuss. But you see, I've been ridiculed and battered with some very serious injuries. Parkinson's, for example, is a shipwreck for everybody but the people who want to sell my soul to Jesus freaks. And it's a result of poison crime. And it's not possible to imagine that the evidence has been overlooked. Wattenmaker was in a gang who worshipped King Crimson. He played it for me and then went into neurosurgery. So they clearly, the Zionist Israeli army clearly poisoned me with a nerve agent. That would be true even if they didn't write that they did in their own handwriting, which they did do. So Pitt, it was very serious, as we see from Gaza, when they say the nature of reality is at work. They're very serious people. Now, what motivates me to talk today is a desire to put into a domain where it can be reviewed by peers should anybody choose to want to review it. Which is to say, anybody who wants to see the good sleep well for once. What I want to discuss is the lockdown, the padlock on media, because there is one. There is a padlock on media. And it comes from the claim that the people who found the script and never told anybody what they found and went to work with it were not the authors, which is a strange thing to overlook, given that they worked for Fox Media, moved into my house, knew where to find them, neglected to tell me. It's a very strange thing to overlook, the possibility that they were finding something that they knew was already there, they already knew was there. But that's the disturbing fait accompli that we've been given. And the elements are that Reagan was victimized, Lenin was victimized, and Yoko Ono is the leader of the bereaved. That's the cry of battle and war is hell, you might say. And that throws a lock. You can unlock it, but they won't. You can point out the fact that Reagan's attorneys, Mile is the first letters of Nosferatu's real name. He's a Polish man who took control of the United States through Greater Israel's Elon Musk brain implant in the United States of America, which you're seeing right there. Miles was, let's give some credit to the kids of Pittsburgh at Aldernich. Political correctness forbids them from discriminating against somebody of Arab, Levantian descent or Muslim beliefs. Well, this guy was the number 2 hot dog with his friend on top, Albert, of the Pitt Law School, and drug pusher, hoochie selling slanderer. That was it. And he sat there on the wall of the university's Cathedral of Learning. I just hate herbs at the top of his lungs at lunchtime. I don't know why. I just hate herbs. And he had me in D.C. He was working for Wesley Posner, who wrote Hitler Reagan's FEMA Constitution, Federal Emergency Management Agency Constitution, which was lambasted by the left for reopening concentration camps in California. Nobody but made the logical conclusion that the AIDS epidemic was part of a sadistic plan. His lawyers, Miles, had me in D.C. the day he claims he was shot. He comes out and waves to me the night before. He says, oh, no, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. That's what's known as a 3-pronged approach. Philadelphia, Mississippi is where the civil rights protesters were buried in a swamp. And it's also where he began his presidential campaign. Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love because we're supposed to forgive the people who tortured me. They're named Casper, like Weinberger. And Philadelphia is where I was getting off the train from D.C., where his lawyers had me for the show. And he gargoyles, oh, no, I'd rather be in Philadelphia. So you can see the puppet strings. And their brochure reads, there's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes. Now, my mother, who I gave in Christmas of 1980 Double Fantasy, making my sister really mad because she thought I bought it for myself. My mother called Yoko Ono and John Lennon one of the most romantic stories in history. And that's the blood-curdling lock. You can go into it in episode on it. And it's a loyalty oath. It's a maniacal, monomaniacal, megalomaniacal. It's a maniacal loyalty oath to these two evil wizards of a Houdini show. It's a Hollywood Pop-Tart routine, like the Clowniac who jumped out of the Van Gogh cake of Trumpy Tune the very day of the morning that I first released the evidence tape. So they're signaling through the Elon Musk Pentagon Disney system. What's that, queer ball? Say it again, queer ball. That's what they're signaling. Now, if you want to understand what was done to me, which was hideously cruel, I mean, they neuroplasia'd me, they tortured me, they prosecuted me for things I knew nothing about illegally through extra media means, like Clint Eastwood's studios. They poisoned me, they tortured me, they raped people I loved, they murdered people I loved. And then they came out with this idea that you can solve this problem by going along with the plan. Ain't that something? Yeah. So I'm so Parkinson's out I can barely read my own handwriting. You'll pardon the delay. Um, One of the things that Penis J. Sinfield, the mad doctor of King Crimson, the psychopath who set the whole thing up for Hitler Reagan, and Ray Geiger, who I knew, he painted a Greta Garbo painting and showed me some ideas about painting that supposedly indentured me to the clowny acts of German, Pennsylvania, Dutch country. You know, I taught him things about poetry too, and I put a roof over his head so he could do over half the paintings he did. I washed dishes to pay the rent in the house with my mom. So we're certainly even. The way they operate is the Taliban. But Raymond died. Well, if you're saying that I'm to blame for Raymond's death, get a life. I love the boy. So I'm not going to discuss it with you. So they both have the same mentality towards someone like me because they're militarists. They were both militarists. And Geiger thought it was funny, and Sinfield thought it was funny to get a man by his penis with a woman who's a hireling undercover, invade the home for control of the person's psyche. Is their um, fantasy of American cultural absolutes. This is all about these kinds of absolutes because they're ignoring petitions from the world's poor for water, for sustainable development, in favor of saying, let's do some hanky pank. I call Pennsylvania the hanky pank state. They issued a work permit for genocide porn to an overdeveloped pubescent girl who was biologically the same age as me. I was just a child who had been tortured into traumatic surrender and used me for a blackmail game that they consider totalitarian. It's Biden building his more perfect union by plying Greg Carl's smorgasbord of ethnic symbol one night stands for the Neva Pornographic Company, who this girl was part of. Her sister was named Neva. Manson Cinema. It's a snuff film operation from the Zionists of Pennsylvania. And it's perfectly obvious. And I was arguing with Pittsburgh's mentality for years in public in the Pitt News. And they're obviously very serious genocidalists. I mean, until I saw Gaza, I could almost tell myself this can't be real, which is why I told a sergeant from the police. The reason I got in so deep was because I kept telling myself this can't be real. She said, I understand perfectly. How they operate, they tell you go to a safe zone. They send me to AD was the walrus, right? Abused Deaf Advocacy Service. And what do? They stick me in a group of people who knew the girl who was the attack prostitute, who was covering for her, who knew all the slanders, who wanted to use biological warfare on someone they considered a rival and a freak. That's protection from abuse. Whoa, no, it's Seattle, Washington. And they said the safe zones, you've heard this story before. Israel lies. It's so mundane. Israel lies. It's not even a contested issue. That's what they do. And it's like surrender to Franco. You know, he said, I promise if you surrender, you will be treated to the accords of the international legal system. And then he lines him up and shoots him. You know, that's Israel. So now there was a character at the governor's school who said that when people are bereaved and lose everything, you know, they bomb your house. Oh, I have Allah. Allah is sufficing. And she was Jewish. She was an Israeli. She used to talk about just walking over the boys who were in the gutter in Africa when she visited. She went to Radcliffe. She knew this kid named Eric Horn who made a real monster of himself towards me at Carnegie Mellon University. And I wrote the title of the Governor's School Creative Writing Journal with Eric Horn. Clinging to Stones in Whitewater was half his, half mine. It was a poem we wrote together. And Deborah Burnham, get it? Burn him. It's a symbol like index throughout the whole system. Said no, that never happened. You never did that. It was all hid. And somehow Penis Gabriel got wired into it and played the same game on me with a song called That Voice Again. So it's idiotic to ignore it. It's a monstrosity being hardwired into American psyche by Musk and Israel, who took control of America through the Israeli implant. And all of this stuff is very strange that they would overlook it. It's very strange. Now, I'll mention my irreconcilable differences with Lavrov, Putin, and Russia. Because Fripp believes the ends justifies the means. I see the means as the ends. In other words, if you want to contradict overpopulation, you distribute water. I have a book about understanding poverty. It shows you how to go about caring for the poor, that they don't rely on children as their safety net. And it gradually reduces population while enhancing prosperity. That's what I believe. These monsters say, oh, we need to depopulate now because nobody's going to reduce driving. They'll get mad at Jimmy Carter if we reduce the speed limit and build solar power. And this is the Beatles. The maniacs of absolute mainstream. I'll show you some stuff. Bill Clinton made mouth to sex organ discussions about American politics mainstream with Monica Lewinsky. Leslie Katz was at my beck and call anytime she wanted my tongue on her twat for months and years, and we never made love. It was one of these jobbers. Okay? It was all virginity on the chinny chin chin. And that was the essence of their entire program, this lewd pornographic web of Israel in Pittsburgh. And they apparently have a theosophy of sorts, which is to say, media by supply and demand reduces to TV, like Trump Vance. And that's the devil, because people want pornography. And these people believe that Hitler is back from the dead. They call him Lazarus and Casper. And put the U.S. over the swastika in their imagery. Franklin Graham is a good example. He hates humanism. My father's book, Humanizing the School, hates. He says the greatest threat to democracy since communism was a school bus driver. You know how Israelis love to bomb school buses. And he has this guy in his chaplain service who he says just happened to be very good at executing conscience, so we called him Hitler. And he says, I want to be called Lazarus now because I'm back from the dead. And they weep and cry and embrace him. And who's Franklin Graham's man in arms? Was Oliver North, of course, who was working with Foucault on the Ayatollah pipeline between Israel and the extremists in Russia. See, I don't believe that the ends justifies the means. So I have irreconcilable differences with the current guard in Russia. After all, people do perform martyrdom tasks for recognition. What am I going to get? Vlad's autograph for dying of Lou Gehrig's or something? And which is the sort of sick mind they have. They've been pimping the idea that that's next. They have sick, disorderly minds. And it comes from the University of Pittsburgh's philosophical higher guild working with Putin's Russia through Hitler Reagan's arsenal. They're both military nationalists. Now, if Russia were to do the minimum decency of admitting that international law was broken by the AIDS attack and the Two Virgins pussy ball is not a perfect sport, we might get somewhere with sustainable development. But I don't know that that's happening. And it goes back to JFK because, see, the history of Oswald going to Russia implies a 50-50 deal, much like the non-aggression pact between Russia, KGB, and the CIA, or Zionist implants from Elon Musk. Putin's always tooting his horn about what an admirable man Musk is. And of course, we know his confederacy with Toon is so solid that we call them the Trumpy Toon Putinees. It's a leapfrog oligarchy. Behind the scenes, they leap around and invest in millionaire yachts. And they start wars between the poors, reasoning to the winners go the spoils. The suckers and losers die, and the lucky get away. And this is their PlayStation at work. And the reason you're not allowed to talk politics because it might come out. It might come out that all they do is bomb and starve. People who are dignified, decent people who just need water, who need freedom from occupation, who need freedom of association, the right of assembly. Nobody wants to push protest rallies into the breaking point of rioting except the mayhem freaks loyal to the Zionist implant. That's what's really very serious. Now, someone's going to accuse me of anti-Semitism because I don't see Jill Stein as the same. You're supposed to see she's symbolic of the acceptance that AIDS was, how Zappa put it, mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. I see it as a violation of international law. The means are the ends. And now it's been said by somebody, okay? And say, well, you have to fight for that. Well, everybody is fighting for international law. South Africa was party to this disaster. And it does undermine their stand against Gaza to a point, to the point where they start demanding reparations and all the rest. But it doesn't undermine their stand for international law to be at work in the liberation of Gaza, the protection of the children, the immoralization of this horror in Gaza as an eternal crime that illustrates how creepy America became under the influence of people like the University of Pittsburgh and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Oliver North, and Hitler Reagan. I have plenty of evidence that shows their cinema semiotics, that they diabolicized a theme from the television circuits, conjuring demonology about pornography as an illustration of their objective to sanctify Hitler as the second coming. It's so deranged and obvious that they pluck the most loathsome of strings. They call me a schizophrenic. They even write a song about schizoid men where they say paranoia is poison. And the poison is perfectly obvious. The poison of their gang was in the language of the gang. The dialectic is established at the outset. They came up with other words like pigment and figment. And it's obvious that was poison. And so what they do is give me Parkinson's. The tape will self-destruct in 5 years when dementia sets in. The brain apparatus of the queerbait who was implanted with the Elon Musk snapping turtle will be part of the Mission Impossible. We'll all forgive, and Casper will reign as a fourth dimensional synthesis of Hitler and sacred John Lennon. That is about how romantic John Yoko really was.